Okie doke. So, so today we're focusing on those other two legs of the Thrive stool, and we're kind of breaking up the time into two parts. We have Katie Riley and Andrew McGoff here to help kind of lead us in the conversation and really provide an overview on these kind of from a county perspective in terms of what's going on, what are conversations going on around these topics in our community. And so we're going to go ahead and let Katie kick it off with the focus on childcare, and we'll kind of just go from there. And I think we got probably, I don't know, Katie, do you have 20 minutes, and then certainly have time for questions?
Sure, that's fine.
And then we'll switch to Andrew. So I guess with that, we'll take it away.
Okay. So really pleased to be here today and talk about one of the three legs of the stool. And this one was recently expanded from early learning to early learning and youth enrichment. So it's not just childcare, but talking about what kind of services are needed for kids, period. And that's, kind of birth through at least K-12, and Andrew's probably going to be talking about after that. Let's see if I can get this to advance. There we go. So just for those people who don't know me, I'm retired twice. I retired from both UCLA and then went to work at OHSU, where I was an assistant professor of public health and preventive medicine. And let's see if I can get this, I guess, can you see the full slide, or is it only partial?
We can see the full slide.
Okay, very good. So I'm also in my retirement. I got involved with a group, and we formed Washington County Kids, which is a nonprofit, a 501c3. And we're dedicated to increasing awareness of the need for out-of-school time programs for kids, that school is not enough. And I'm also a member of the Thrive's leadership team. So I think everybody knows the need is great. We have one of the largest youth populations in the whole state, and they need to be supported. So the research on non-school programs is pretty clear. We know that there's a lot of research about early childhood programs preparing kids for school and life. Probably the Perry Preschool program is probably one of the most famous research projects which have demonstrated that. And they've done longitudinal studies which have shown how preschool and early childhood programs, infants, toddlers, Head Start, in particular early Head Start, how that really does make a difference. And so I think that's pretty clear. There is also research that clearly identifies that after school programs make a difference as well. These kind of programs improve school and work habits, their effectiveness and attitudes, overall attitudes. It also helps improve the grades and test scores of participants. And kids who participate in these programs also tend to earn more credits, stay in school longer, and graduate on time. They're much more likely to have that happen. So these out-of-school time programs also prevent crime and victimization. If kids are involved in a program after school, they're less likely to commit crimes. And on the same token, there's also less likely to become victims of crimes from their peers or even of adults. The programs that include STEM also encourage kids to go in that career direction. And we have examples of that happening even in Washington County. And then also, if kids are involved in programs during the summer, summer slide can be prevented as well. Boys and Girls Club has had an excellent program during the summer where they've shown that actually kids can go back to school with even being better prepared than they were when they left school in June. Some recent findings that a lot of people may not be aware of is that the adolescent brain keeps on developing. We know that probably the largest period of brain development is through infancy and toddlers and even preschool. However, the second most rapid development time is during adolescence. And this is really critical to know because kids during adolescence, their brains are not fully developed until maybe the age of 25. So I'm talking here about the ages between about 10 and 25, where research has found that kids are much more impulsive. This is because their prefrontal cortex hasn't developed fully. They also are having hormones run crazy, and we know what happens at that point. But also one of the things that they know is that dopamine, that reward mechanism, sometimes is actually not working as well as it does in adulthood, so that kids are much more influenced by the need for rapid rewards. Also, if they have exposure to things like drugs, alcohol, a lot of times that reward system is not as effective. And so it requires using more of a substance in order to get the same kind of effect. So this is why kids who start early in terms of using alcohol or drugs or nicotine, smoking, oftentimes get hooked a lot faster and find it harder to quit later. So other recent research has shown that after school and other enrichment programs, when those programs are participated in by kids who are in early childhood programs, it's an additive effect. It's more of a cumulative effect. So it's not a matter of either or, it's a matter of wanting to add on to the effectiveness. So these kind of enrichment opportunities are very important. I particularly want to emphasize that those kids who are unsupervised are at risk, and it also looks like a missed opportunity. And here in Washington County, we have kids who are not graduating. We have kids who need workforce development, frankly. And it's a missed opportunity. Whereas if we are able to give them opportunities earlier, they're much more likely to be successful. So just in summary, the benefits of out-of-school time programs are preparation for school, connections with consistent adult role models, safe, reliable, quality care, and sustained development while they're in school. Also, support during their adolescent development years. And finally, career success. And as we know, academic success equals lifelong economic advantage, definitely a positive result. And we would much rather have kids being successful and paying taxes, contributing to the community, than being a drain on the community. So I just want to highlight a report that we did in 2018, 2019, where we did community conversations and focus groups. And we found we did the focus groups, but we also did an online survey for people who did not participate in the focus groups. And so we had about over 200 unique participants. This report, a link to that report, will be given out to you after the meeting. What we found is that people who have kids who are participating in programs, they benefit from those programs, but they also reported that there were barriers to access. A lot of times they didn't have any information from their schools or anyone else about where to find programs. And so they were kind of stumbling around in the dark in terms of how to find care in order to work. The really big problem, of course, is high cost. And then there are all these other barriers as well. Mismatches, just not having programs available. There are just, not enough programs. And a lot of times there's wait lists, so people can't get in. For younger kids, there are some resources, but you have to be in a very low income level to receive those, or you have to be able to afford those programs as well. And then a lot of times there's a lot of sameness in the programs. Quality may not be as high, but we're attempting to work on that. And the last point about inadequate programming for specific populations, for instance, kids who have disabilities, even kids who are in high school, there's not a lot that's available for kids to do things. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of the current systems that we have in place in Washington County to address these. So first of all, in early learning. The Early Learning Hub in Washington County coordinates activities for early learning and do a good job. There are programs specifically for young kids, and usually those are available only for people who are at 300% or below of the federal poverty guidelines. So the federal poverty guidelines, Kemp, you can correct me if I'm inaccurate on this, but is like $27,000 per year for a family of 4, approximately. So that's a pretty low bar. And so it's hard for people to qualify for that. OCDC is Oregon Child Development Coalition. There's also the Earned Income tax, recovery tax, that is available also for parents as well who meet poverty guidelines. The Child Care Resource and Referral Service that is operated by Community Action, and Karen Henkenmeyer is on the call today, and she can answer any questions about that as well as other early learning programs. There's also Preschool Promise, which is funded by the state, and Baby Promise, which is a home visitation opportunity for newborns. In terms of youth enrichment, I just have Washington County kids up here because we're attempting to coordinate as much as we can. We have people involved in our group who are private providers and also nonprofits. And the nonprofits include those who are offering full-time after-school programs, and even summer. And that includes like Boys and Girls Club, and Rachel is on the call today as well. And so she knows a lot about that. And then there are limited time programs such as groups like Math Gamers, Chess for Success, Girls Inc., where there are, or even Chicas, which is only available to girls who are adolescent girls 1 day a week. But these are all limited time programs. So both full-time and limited programs are available from nonprofits as well. And then also private providers also provide limited time programs too. But the system is really a problem because there is no overall coordination at the county level of all of these programs. And there's no sustainable funding for any of them. Although there are a lot of early learning programs even for people who are who qualify for the low income programs that are available, only about 19% of the people who are eligible for those programs are served by them. So that means there's a huge group that is not served by that as well. And really the key to all of this is funding. That's really just to be, frank about it. So the current discussion, what we have pursued and with others, is trying to see what can be done about funding. And we have made a proposal about coordination and funding for those 0 to 18 years. We had proposed a property tax. And we have considered also a tax on high income earners. The structure of the program would be county administered, and a committee would decide on priorities, very similar to the LIP group that's working on housing, similar to that kind of a setup. Preschool for All is being considered by a group of school superintendents, and that would only be available to 3 and 4-year-olds. Their funding source that they're proposing is a tax on high income, similar to what was passed in Multnomah County. The structure of how that would be administered, I guess, is to be decided. It's in early stages of discussion. And they are proposing that would be put on the ballot in November 2022. There's a third avenue that's a possibility for funding as well. This is Senate Bill 299, which would allow the formation of children's service districts that would serve kids from 0 to 18 years. And that would merely allow people to collect signatures to put something on the ballot. The funding source for that would be a property tax initiative, and the structure, of course, would be decided by the people making the proposal and putting the initiative on the ballot. And that's why I put down there TBD, to be decided. So this gives you kind of an overview of what's being considered at the present time in terms of how to approach the issue. In the meantime, there's a group of us, both Washington County kids and friends of Washington County kids and others, have pooled money together, plus receiving some money from a national group to do polling. And the results are in. So the results are definitely positive. Almost 80% of the people who were polled, which was a representative group of voters throughout the county, have said they would vote for having funding go for out of school time programs for kids. And they really favor having it be for kids of all ages, not just for a narrow group of age range. This polling is very encouraging, but it needs to be acted upon. And at this point, we are talking with people, letting them know the results of the polling and encouraging participation. And we have yet to hear back from some county commissioners and others as well in terms of their willingness to talk about this, but it is the polling is encouraging. So for more information about what we're doing and what can be done and willingness to participate in any of this, we are very happy to talk with you. I'm happy to talk with anybody. And I'm happy to answer to any questions too. And I will say that another thing that will be sent out to you is today is a link to the proposal that we submitted to the Board of County Commissioners last July or June. And you can read through it and see what you think. There's also going to be the link to our report on the focus groups and our survey. And also there's an article, a short article about the value of after school. and how the cumulative effect is very helpful. I'm happy to answer to any questions.
Katie, just an observation. So when you say that the system is not coordinated, I just want to clarify that the early learning Washington County is coordinating services from prenatal to 5 years old. So it might not be coordinating the after school programs, but I just want to make that clarification because those are two different systems that are interconnected or should be better connected.
Right, that's kind of what my point was, that there is a system for early learning through the hub, but not for other kids.
Well, and I know we've got a few other folks on the call. You know, I thank you, Katie, for that. And I might actually pitch it over to Karen Henkemeyer from our Child Care Resource and Referral team. I don't know, Karen, if there's anything you also can add in terms of kind of what are some of the trends that you're seeing on, as Begonia noted, there are kind of two systems there with the out of school, you know, the older kids in the 0 to 5 age range. I wonder if there might be anything you can also share or add and things that you've been hearing and seeing.
How much time do I have?
Oh, let's try to keep it to just a few minutes.
Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Karen, Child Care Resource and Referral Manager at Community Action. And as you probably know, childcare has never been in everyone's mind and in committees, et cetera, as it has been recently. So the childcare system has been fragile prior to COVID happening. And so now with COVID, our childcare system has nearly shattered. So what we are facing, not only a countywide, statewide, but nationwide, is a severe crisis in eligible workforce for childcare. The main reason that is because they don't get paid a living wage. They're one of the lowest paid professions. And another reason in which it became very common knowledge is not having schools in session. School was childcare for K through 12, right? So understanding that that is a huge need in making sure our community thrives. So what I always say is childcare is a profession that make all other professions possible. So we are really looking at a crisis of the workforce and training, as well as financial assistance. So
let's not forget, Karen, infrastructure as well, okay?
Infrastructure, yeah, absolutely. So I can say, for example, we have fewer high quality programs in Washington County than we did pre-COVID. So we are losing programs as far as the number, but then also as far as the quality. So if possible, I could come back sometime and really give you a spiel of childcare.
We've talked about that too, Karen. I bet I'm sure this group would be very much interested in diving in more deep there. But yeah, do we have any other questions from folks? Just kind of on the status of childcare across the spectrum.
I've heard that there's some interest in developing an apprenticeship related to childcare. I think that's underway with SEIU and some other workforce boards from across the state. I think Eastern Oregon is pretty heavily engaged in that. which I think could build a pathway that leads to better wages, leads to better benefits, and a more, steady pipeline of workers interested in pursuing childcare. So that might be something we as a collaborative could look at and also get behind if we think it's got some legs. And I know the folks at SEIU who have been sort of leading the conversation, which I think they'd be more than happy, I think, to come and visit Thrives at another time. And then sort of off that topic, though, Katie, from a policy perspective, I mean, we're always doing this stuff to, remediate summer learning loss. Has there been any conversations about, year-round school and what those implications might be? And are there groups that are thinking about that and advocating for that as a potential way, it could, potentially mitigate summer learning loss, and it sort of acknowledges that we're not an agrarian based economy anymore where everyone has to go to the fields and pick berries or tend to the farms. And I know that many other states have pursued that pretty effectively. So I'm just wondering if there's any voice in Oregon around those kinds of policy changes that might solve some of the problems as well.
I haven't heard anybody really seriously considering it. One of the things is that even if you have year-round school, you have to have vacation stuff built in terms of, and so that tends to vary at different times. And so it's still maybe a hardship for families. And also it is for after school programs, other programs, then they have to plan on that as well. But I haven't heard anyone seriously considering it here at all.
It's actually kind of, I've found it interesting that there hasn't actually been I haven't heard anything publicly either over the past year. And I would have thought if there was a time for a push for some idea like that, it would have been happening this year, given how many kids have been.
Well, I think research is kind of mixed on it in terms of the effect on kids and families. I'd have to look into it a little bit more. Maybe I can get back to you on it, but I haven't heard for policymakers. I haven't heard policymakers talking about it. The only thing I've heard the superintendents talking about is having preschool for all. And nationally, the research and and funders are tending to move away from preschool for all necessarily, unless it's kind of included in the family plan proposal that Biden's doing. I don't know what the success might be in terms of funding for that and for childcare. In hearing Merkley on Monday at the Westside Economic Alliance Forum, he sounded kind of doubtful in terms of the success of those programs getting through the Senate. So that's really up in the air.
Well, before we maybe jump to Andrew, I get maybe one last question. I don't know if anybody on here, maybe Begonia or Karen, you might be able to speak to this. Is there any more you all are hearing about kind of where the preschool for all conversation currently sits in our community? Is it in its infancy?
Yeah, I actually posted the link on the chat just in case that you want to sign up, whether if it's for the task force or the policy and program work group or the infrastructure work group. So meetings are going to start happening this month. So the first one that will start is the task force on the 28th. So all the meetings are always going to take place on Fridays. And the task force, the first meeting is going to be like around 90 minutes, 2 hours, because it is the first one introducing this project. But I believe that they want to make it a little bit shorter, like 90 minutes. but definitely the work groups are gonna be like a 3-hour meetings. And so the policy and program is gonna take place always the first Friday of the month, starting next month. And the infrastructure is gonna be the third Friday of the month. At this point, I believe that we have a substantial number of people that sign up. So we have two amazing co-chairs for the task force. One is Olga Cunha, representing Hillsborough School District, and the other one is Bridget Cook, representing Adelante Mujeres. And they are the ones signing off in like who is going to be participating in those groups. But we are actually supporting them on this because we are sponsoring this project with funding, both Early Learning Washington County and the county. Yeah. So we are welcoming you.
Awesome. Thanks, Begonia.
Yeah, and about the programs, one of the issues that is a beautiful issue, but it's also a curse that we are having this year, is that there is a lot of funding for summer programs, and there is funding for early learning, and we are encountering that now, like what Katie was saying, there are some school districts that they are saying we are not going to be offering, for instance, like Preschool programs this summer, or like there are no funding partners to run after school or summer programs. It's a beautiful issue to have, to be overflowed with funding, but when funding comes to you with a really short notice, it's really hard to plan, and there's no way to plan for the long term. And definitely also like CBOs and culturally specific organizations and grassroots organizations are struggling to like apply for these opportunities, and then they also have to launch them and find the right staffing, right? So it's a big issue.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll add on that too, the part of the problem is it's being done through the school districts. So for providers to be involved, it's like they have to be selected by the school district. And school districts haven't been set up to do all of this before. So for them, it's like setting up all of this infrastructure all of a sudden. So that's an issue as well. I'd be really happy to talk with people who might be interested in working on, kind of the systems issues as well.
All right. Well, certainly a robust conversation. Lots of, I hope, I think we even got some notes. I think for those of us who are on the leadership team, I think there are some good topic areas to be bringing back for some deeper dives in future meetings. So thank you, Katie, for that overview. So we'll go ahead and hand things over to you now, Andrew, to talk about the workforce perspective and overview of what we're seeing going on here in our community. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Kim. Let me get to the beginning here. Can everyone see this now? Our big company logo. All right, well, thank you, Kemp, and thanks, Katie. That was really informative. And actually, you provided the perfect segue when you said, there's some systemic challenges here that we need to think about, because I don't think that's unique to early learning and the way Oregon approaches that, whether it's education. Workforce development is somewhat similar, although we do have some federal infrastructure in place that I think gives us a bit of a leg up in terms of trying to figure out how to coordinate and organize things. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Andrew McGoff, and I'm with Work Systems, which is the Portland Metro Workforce Development Board. We are actually designated by the governor and local elected officials in Washington and Multnomah counties to receive certain pots of federal and state money to focus on building and improving the quality of the regional workforce and making sure that employers have the talent that they need to grow and thrive across the region. We are not a direct service organization. We're really an intermediary organization. So we do a lot of policy work, we do a lot of planning, we do some design work, and then we do a lot of contracting. So we have a lot of partners and providers across the communities, all focused on hopefully trying to improve the quality of the workforce, and specifically for individuals who have been historically left behind or are struggling, low income, disconnected kids. So that's a little bit about work systems. But now I want to give you just sort of an overview of what that public system looks like to us in Washington County. So there's actually, this is federally mandated. So we can discuss the merits of this design at another time, but we're doing the best we can to implement sort of this federal notion. And part of what the federal law says is that you have to have these things called one-stop centers. And we actually have 2 of them in Washington County. And in the state of Oregon, those are called WorkSource Oregon. It's the WorkSource Oregon system. And locally, we call that WorkSource Portland Metro. And the 2 facilities here, one is on the Willow Creek campus of Portland Community College. And the other one just moved to Tigard. It was formerly in Tualatin. It shifted over to Tigard, and we actually haven't had an official opening yet because of COVID. But it moved over to Tigard in part because shifting demographics within the county, population shifts, changes to concentrations of lower income people really dictated that the site be relocated to Tigard, which is sort of more of the southern section of the county. It's right off of 99. It's actually pretty accessible, more accessible than the prior location. But so within these facilities, there's a broad array of primarily state agencies that deliver services. The sort of biggest partner in all of this is the Oregon Employment Department. And so they're joined in these centers by Department of Human Services, by Department of Vocational Rehabilitation, Job Corps. There's a whole array of sort of state and federal level partners that are mandated to deliver services within these facilities. But we recognize that these can be big, impersonal, sort of sometimes difficult to navigate facilities. So for a number of years, we as the Workforce Board have really been trying to reach out to community-based organizations to really make a more meaningful and substantive connection to that larger system. So as we go through this, I'm going to talk a little bit about organizations within Washington County who we consider to be aligned partners. And the idea really is, how do you take the wonderful expertise and experience of those community-based organizations who are really good at population-specific services, at culturally specific services, at reaching out to populations we know really should be prioritized for services through this public system. So how do we make and take advantage of the resources and expertise of those community-based organizations, and then make a substantive connection to this sort of bigger, broader public workforce system? So that's kind of, I don't know if people know, like Stacy Triplett or Blair Bisht. We have people who have really been trying to engage more meaningfully with organizations across Washington County to make these kinds of connections. So when you look at the public workforce system, again, sort of under this green column, it shows the centers and then who those partners are that are sort of physically located at the center. And then to the right, under the aligned community partners, those are organizations that we either have a contractual relationship with to deliver specific services, or we've developed a memorandum of understanding about how we create connections to that system. And then over here just gives you sort of a sense of the volume that runs through the Washington County system. It's about 12,000 people last year. So this is 2019 numbers. It's pre-pandemic numbers because everything sort of went out the window there, but it shows also sort of the breadth of asset there. So, we're placing a lot of people. There's a lot of staff there. Most of them, again, are state staff, but it's really like, how do we take best advantage of that capacity to make sure the communities we really want to serve most get access to that resource and that asset. And by the way, we anticipate that come around December, that 12,000 number will jump to about 25,000 is our current estimate. Because in September, all of the extended benefits that are available to people now under unemployment insurance will go away. And we anticipate then a lot of those people are going to go to these facilities, whether they're the Beaverton or the now Tigard site, to seek services. And we think that number is at least going to double come September. So there's a bunch of stuff that's available there. I won't belabor this. It's career advising, career exploration, resume workshops, group trainings, on-the-job training. So the idea is that there's a broad array of services that are available to people who connect to that system. So really making sure that our community-based partners understand what those services are and then have capacity to access them for their customers who are ready to take advantage of them. So that's just a list of those services. So I wanted to give you some update on the impacts of COVID to the Washington County workforce, at least from our perspective. So since March of 2020, we've lost over 15,000 jobs in Washington County. And I'm going to say this right now, part of the reason that we have a regional relationship is that the economy doesn't function at the single jurisdictional level. I mean, people I know want to know that, but it really doesn't. Our economy really functions at the MSA level, which is the metropolitan statistical area, 7 counties, 4 of them in Oregon, 3 in Southwest Washington. So it's a much more dynamic, multi-jurisdictional landscape as it relates to the economy. And we lost about 68,000 jobs in that bigger regional view, but 15,000 jobs in Washington County. We have more than 17,000 people currently unemployed. The current unemployment rate still is relatively low in sort of historical terms, but it's more than double what it was pre-pandemic. This number is over a broader period of time. That's why it's bigger. But the real interesting factor here is if you look at those 17,000 people who are unemployed right now, more than 50% of them have been unemployed for greater than 40 weeks, which is considered being long-term unemployed, because the longer you're unemployed, the more difficult it is to return to work, because there's some, your skills atrophy, they become obsolete, you lack skills in the first place, whatever those issues might be, something is in the way of you getting back to work. And it's usually more complicated than just a desire to go to work. We had almost 23,000 of those initial UI claimants from Washington County worked in the accommodations, food service, or retail sectors. And what we all know we lost a lot of those jobs, but the issue there is people of color, younger workers, women are disproportionately represented in occupations in those industries. So that's who have been most impacted by the COVID downturn so far. Right now, people aren't expecting us to return to pre-pandemic job levels until sometime after 2025. So that's a long-term out. Again, to my point about accommodation food service, about 50% of UI claimants right now have a high school diploma or less. That compares to 25% of the broader labor market, meaning if you took the whole labor force, only 25% of that labor force has a high school diploma or less. So again, they're overrepresented in the people who are currently unemployed or have been disconnected from the labor force. We have about 52,000 people on food stamps in Washington County. That's a 27% increase since the start of the pandemic. 1 in 3 residents, as we all know, we've been talking about this forever, struggle with housing. And to Katie's point, almost 6,000 young people, that's young people between the ages of 16 and 24 in Washington County, are neither connected to school or work. And that's a pre-pandemic number. So we anticipate that number is going to be significantly higher once we crunch the numbers after all the dust settles around this stuff. And sort of the final thing that I think we ought to keep in mind is that despite, massive numbers of unemployed people, the job postings in the region have increased 53% from last April and are continuing to climb. So there are a lot of opportunities out there, and I'm sure that people have been talking and hearing about the labor shortage and why aren't people going back to work. And, I was on a Senate hearing or a House hearing yesterday, and I kind of got drilled by people because we were talking about unemployment, and they're like, well, I go to my community and all I see is help wanted signs. And there is some truth to that there are open positions, but I think it's more complicated than just, suggesting that because people are getting extended unemployment benefits, they just don't want to go back to work. I don't necessarily buy into that as being the primary driver for the mismatch between job openings and unemployment numbers. But anyway, that's sort of a view of what we think is the challenges that we're currently facing and will face moving forward. So how do we address that? And I'm going to shift to sort of the present. And again, I will send a proposal out to everybody that we developed for Senator Steiner Hayward. She requested that we try and aggregate some interest in workforce development and send it to them for potential funding. We did that, the 2-day notice. I'm sure others were asked to submit something. You had about 2 days to solve the world's problems and send them over to the legislature, and then we didn't hear anything back. So, but we think we have a good idea, and we think it's one worth pursuing, and we want to work with Thrives and others to see if we can't push this over the finish line. So we proposed ARPA resources of about $6 million to serve 1,000 Washington County residents, and specifically those residents who have been most impacted by the COVID-19 downturn. We want to build on all of that infrastructure that exists out there. The Big 10 approach works. What's lacking is resources. We want to invest in stuff that we know works. We've lived through recessions before. We've also worked with low income and other barriered populations for years and years, and we know what those activities are that really help people right the ship, if you will, and then acquire the skills they need to pursue and be successful in career track employment. It's not rocket science. And then we really want to make sure that our recovery efforts are equitable, that they're sustainable, and that it results in continuous system improvements. So what we're suggesting is really increasing this community-based and work source capacity. To Katie's point about building systems, it's, systems are hard, and especially systems based on coalitions, but they're necessary. When you look at the numbers, if you want to bring stuff to scale, we can't do it organization by organization. We have to do this stuff together. We believe that earn and learn, like apprenticeship opportunities, like paid work experience, like on-the-job trainings, have all proven to be very effective ways to get people income, to make up some wage differentials while people are getting trained, and to help employers, and to be honest with you, because you can subsidize wages on their behalf in exchange for training and employment opportunities, and then really making substantive connections to the wraparounds that we know low-income people particularly need, such as childcare, housing, and the like. So we're talking about, we have this network within Washington County, and what it needs is, it needs to build its capacity. So it needs resources to shore up the capacity. These are many of the organizations that we work with in Washington County already, and that we would advocate need more resources to shore up their capacity to do the good work that we know they're capable of. And that includes everything from outreach to career coaching to creating those relationships that are essential to helping people transition from poverty to prosperity. So these earn and learn activities, again, we have definitions, we have structures, we have partners that all know how to deliver this stuff, and they've done it in the past, in very effective ways. And really what we need is the capacity to do more of this. So these are the kinds of things we would suggest investments be put into to really help address some of these challenges that we're currently facing. And then finally, we know that workforce development is just not about acquiring skills. It really is about the entire package. It's about, the thrives, and our conversation around housing and early learning and workforce development. These things are integrally related, and they need to be available to people on a sustained basis if we really want them to achieve the ultimate goal, which is whatever they define as economic self-sufficiency and the capacity to support themselves and their families. So that's kind of where we are on this. I'm happy to, I will send out the actual proposal language that we sent to Senator Steiner Hayward, but we are going to be shopping this to the county and to the county commission, because I think it's a good way to sort of jumpstart and use some of this ARPA resource that is coming to the county. So happy to take questions or hear your ideas. So thanks.
Andrew, this is Begonia. I just want to know, out of the 1,000 families or participants that you are targeting, can you talk a little bit about the priority populations that you are targeting?
Yes. So BIPOC communities. So, generally we're focused on those communities that have been most impacted by COVID-19 and the associated economic downturn. So it's BIPOC, it's women, it's young workers, it's people with disabilities. It's all spelled out in our regional workforce plan. It's people receiving public assistance. It's people engaged in housing programs. So it's the populations that we've all, I think, continually talked about as being those priorities for services.
Thank you. I just don't want to forget. I know that you say BIPOC, but I don't want to forget about the Pacific Islander community on the Beaverton, Hillsborough, and Tiger Tualatin corridor, that they are really struggling at this point. Also high involvement on the juvenile system. And until recently, until March, they don't even qualify for OHP. So the IRCO is the one that has a contract in Tiger Tualatin. So I will strongly suggest to, picking the Pacific Islander as one of the priority populations.
Yeah, we contract substantially with IRCO and partner with them, both in Multnomah County and Washington County, and they are ID'd as one of the partner organizations involved in the system.
Andrew, I'm curious, going back to you noted the question you were getting yesterday about, the impact of unemployment benefits and how that, the perception that might be having an impact on the labor market at the moment. And you alluded to it probably is a much more complex issue. What do you all see as some of the other factors that may be impeding workers to return to the workforce beyond just the unemployment benefit?
Yeah, I think, issues like childcare, women have been disproportionately impacted by this Great Recession. It was, the COVID-19, back to the last crisis. So, I think access to childcare, uncertainty about school hours. Even though some schools have returned, the way that schools have reopened have in many ways kind of complicated the opportunities for people to get back to work. I think, look, we're still in the midst of a pandemic. So there's still lingering concerns about illness. There's concerns about, spreading infections and family members. And there's, so I don't know all of the answers, but I suspect that it's a combination of a lot of things. Wages certainly could be a factor. Again, I think, the fact that you're getting some supplemental benefit indicates to me that if you earn more money through unemployment insurance, then we're not paying enough in the jobs that are available. And I also think that there is some significant skill mismatches between the people who are currently receiving unemployment and the jobs that are available. There's always going to be jobs at McDonald's, and it's great that they're giving you a $50 bonus and maybe paying $15 an hour. But most people don't want to work there. Most adults don't want to work there. I'm sorry, and they envision a better place and a better job. So I don't know. More to come on that, I think. Kimberly?
With the huge amount of infrastructure investment that's happening currently, or it's in the pipeline currently, do you see, what do you see as the opportunities there, especially in terms of union workforces?
Well, that's a great question. We've been, for many years, we have been a partner in an organization called the Metropolitan Alliance for Workforce Equity. And several years ago, we worked with a number of organized labor groups, particularly the building trades, to implement what are called community benefits agreements. And tied to those community benefits agreements are, if you're going to use public dollars to build a program, then you ought to have a set aside on those projects for not only minority and women contractors to access the work, but also apprenticeship opportunities for women and minorities to enter into those trades and get the work experience that they need. So we have a pretty robust pre-apprenticeship network right now that we work with. There's 4 registered pre-apprenticeship programs in Multnomah County, and we're currently expanding them into Washington County, including Portland Youth Builders, POIC, who really has a focus. So Portland Youth Builder on disadvantaged youth, POIC has a strong expertise and connection with African-American males, and particularly African-American males who have been impacted by the criminal justice system, because construction, by the way, offers great opportunities despite what your background might be. Constructing Hope, which again really focuses on individuals who have been impacted by by the criminal justice system, and then Oregon Tradeswomen, who really is the premier organization in the state who helps young women enter the construction trade. So we're expanding those to Washington County in partnership with Washington County. But we think building up those kinds of opportunities for people in Washington County to get the skill training through the pre-apprenticeship programs, and then because they're registered pre-apprenticeship programs, they get sort of direct entry into those unions, into apprenticeship slots. So to me, and that's the whole earn and learn model, right? We want to, what we think is we need more of that in Washington County. So spend more money to increase the capacity. So I'll just give you an example. Portland Youth Builders, we funded a cohort of 25 kids just prior to the pandemic. We had 75 kids, most from Western Washington County. They were probably who wanted to get into the program, but we only had money to support 25. Most of them were, kids of color. 71% were kids of color. A high percentage were young girls. So there's demand within the county. What we need is resources to expand those services and programs. So, and one final thing, Kimberly, is the other thing that we have recognized is like low-income people particularly, and especially if you're a woman, you can't afford to just like drop everything and then go to training. So you need income while you're in training. So part of what our proposal calls for too is to stipend people while they're engaged in training so that they can continue to support their children, they can continue to feed themselves and their families, and they have income while they're pursuing training. So those are the kinds of things we're going to do. And tying that to those infrastructure projects is 100% what we ought to be doing, because there ought to be local people working on those projects.
Thank you. That was a really good and thorough answer, and exactly what I wanted to hear.
Good, I'm glad.
I think we have Catherine has her hand raised. Catherine, do you have something to chime in with?
Yeah, I just, first of all, love that you just called out the fact that people can't drop everything. They're too busy surviving sometimes to be able to take advantage of the training opportunities. And that's huge. And that's how people get trapped in poverty wage jobs. And that's a critical piece of anything that moves people forward. But I also just wanted to highlight two things that you had said. The first being that it has to be systems are hard, and we can't just increase capacity agency by agency. It all has to kind of grow together. I think that's a really important point to take away, and that requires that kind of infrastructure and systems work that Begonia was referencing in when we were talking about early childhood and the programs growing up, but also needing to grow together and have some sort of connective tissue that holds the system in coordination to prevent it from becoming chaos and confusion for the people trying to access it. And then second, just your point about the narrative around why people aren't going back to work when there are all these jobs is such an critical thing to take control of collectively, because how people view the choices that people are making will impact future policy decisions. And I think that seems like one area where we can all collectively have an impact on what comes out after this is just really offering that counter narrative that says, you know, it's more complicated than this, and it includes things like access to childcare and supports in the community. So just wanted to thank you for that and also highlight those things.
Thanks, Catherine. I think that's right, is we do have to combat that narrative, because there's already been several states that have decided to cut off the extended UI benefits. You know, I mean, it's not super surprising, and I don't anticipate we would do that here, but at a national level, you know, that's where most of these resources came from. So yeah, I think you're right on. We need to help counter that argument.
All right. Well, any other thoughts or questions for Andrew or the group on the workforce? Fascinating. The stats are.
So this is Katie, and I think that, you know, maybe Andrew and I could work a little bit together, taking a look at what kind of proposal maybe could be looked at, because really what we're looking at here is the need for more support for kids. And I'm not talking just about little kids here, I'm talking about all the way through adolescence, which is probably 25. And it would be much better if there was a coordinated approach rather than piecemeal and the siloing of that, so that there's comprehensive planning. And obviously there needs to be lots of people involved in support. The proposal that we had made to the Board of County Commissioners is a draft form. We're happy to talk with people and maybe see about possibilities of changing that to where it might really affect more of a systems change. And I think Thrives could be instrumental in helping to work on that.
Well, I think great presentations by you both today. Thank you so much for being willing to lead the conversation for us. And I think, you know, for those of us on the call who are on the leadership team, I think we've got a lot of good things to discuss at our next meeting, and in terms of issues to continue bringing forth for this group, and be thinking about collaborations and coordination, what role Thrives could be playing to support some of these initiatives moving forward over the next year. I think we have probably about 15 minutes left. So normally at this point, we also give folks a chance to just go around the screen. If anyone has any kind of lightning round updates or shares they'd like to provide, you know, from their organization, their perspectives that they think folks would be interested in knowing. So I guess perhaps we'll just open it up there and see if anyone has anything they'd like to share or volunteer. And if you're not codependent like me, I'm going to call on you. All right. Well, John, I'm just curious, anything from your world?
I just wanted to remind folks that today is the last day to submit your application for the supportive housing services, the RFPQ for Washington County. So remember to get that in, I think by 4 o'clock.
Good reminder. Okay. Well, I'm seeing a lot of quietness, so I think that might be the sign that I think maybe we're maybe we're done for the morning. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you, Andrew and Katie. Great presentations, and hope everyone has a great, what is it, Wednesday? Yeah, everyone have a great Wednesday today.
Thanks, Cam. Thanks, everyone.